Welcome to GovCon Unscripted, where we dive into the unfiltered stories and strategies from all around the world of government contracting. Join host Chelsea Roberts as she explores how to navigate, thrive, and win in this complex but lucrative industry.
All right. Hey, everyone, and welcome back to GovCon Unscripted. I'm your host, Chelsea, CEO of Collaborative Compositions, and today I've got with us Andy Semotiuk. He is a U.S. Canadian immigration attorney, author, and a Forbes contributor. Andy, who are you and what do you do?
Well, as you've mentioned, I'm a U.S. and Canadian immigration attorney. I've worked, say, 10 years in Los Angeles, 5 years in New York, and currently I'm working in Toronto doing U.S. and Canadian immigration law. And I've written a few books on the theme of immigration, also on the theme of careers and how people can improve their careers or magnify their careers as they're entering the job market. Originally, I was born in Edmonton, Alberta, in Canada, but my life was half in the U.S., half in Canada. So, for example, I went to high school in the United States in Los Angeles, and I practiced, as I mentioned, in those two jurisdictions.
Wow. That's quite the diverse experience set that you've got there. Quite the background.
Yeah, lots of travel.
Hey, I personally love travel, so I think that's a blessing, in my opinion.
Yeah, I've been lucky to be exposed to different lifestyles, not only in two different cities like New York and Los Angeles, but also Canada-U.S. And I've traveled over to Europe, so I have a good sense of what's going on in the world in terms of how people are living and what's a good life as opposed to what's not a good life.
Sure. Times have certainly changed, I would say, with this new administration. And I think things between the U.S. and Canadian in terms of U.S. and Canada in terms of relations have taken a little bit of a shift as of recently. Do you want to comment on that?
Sure. As the administration has been imposing tariffs all over the place, and also making comments about Canada becoming the 51st state of the United States.
We would welcome you, but no pressure.
Okay. It's alarming. This might be,
Yes.
to draw an analogy, if I'm your neighbor next door to you, I come over to your house and I say, gee, you got a nice house here. I'd like to move in here and live with you here and share your life with you. I don't know about that. Is there some consent involved? Do we want to do that? So there's that problem. But we do have to live together as neighbors. Up until now, we've been happy neighbors. We've been living quite well together. And I don't need to go into the details. Canada's been in every war that America has started,
sure.
Almost every time Canada's been there, 9/11 and so on. So it's a surprise that all of a sudden there's these tariffs, and in particular, tariffs to a partner, a close neighbor, and high tariffs, not destroying, but really harming aluminum, steel, and this kind of energy that is going to be sent into the U.S., etc. People are upset. And for example, Canadians are not traveling to the U.S. for vacations, not buying American goods. Canada imposed counter tariffs. But this is not just Canada-U.S. This is worldwide versus U.S. Just as an example, my friend just came back from Southeast Asia. He visited 3 countries, Vietnam, Cambodia, and Thailand. And he traveled like through Japan and so on. He said, not anyone that he met was happy with the United States today. Not one person. Now, maybe there are people that are happy with the U.S., but there are a lot of people who are unhappy with the U.S. But the U.S. is entitled to, it's their ship, they're maneuvering it that way. I'd like to share one historical story just to comment on this particular phase
Please.
of American life. Back, I believe it's in the 15th century, if I'm not mistaken, it was the 15th century, China was a world leader in naval power. They had huge ships the size of football fields or larger, and they traveled all over the world to Arabia, all the way on the Far East, everywhere that ships could go. And there were major traders.
Right.
But a new regime came into effect in China, and it decided that despite its wealth and its far reach and stature, it's going to change course. And what they did is they destroyed every ship they had. They destroyed it all. There were Confucianists who were leading this new philosophy. And from that time on, China just sank into isolation and off the world stage. And we seem to have an epoch like that here now, where we're wondering, why are we doing what we're doing? Like, where's the benefit? Now, I know your show is about contracts with governments and so on, so I'd like to talk about that if you want.
Yes, please.
Okay. In any situation, there's always things that need to be done. And indeed, in this situation, there is a need. So I can mention two particular sort of developments that are taking place that affect my area of immigration. One is, as in the United States, there's an effort to arrest a lot of detainees, a lot of people, detained people who are undocumented and in the U.S. without legal status.
Sure.
Now they're going to be deported. There's an effort being made to deport 11 million people from the U.S. One of the challenges of deporting 11 million people to various places in the world is when you're deporting someone, you have to get consent from the country you're deporting to fly the person back home.
Sure.
I know this because a friend of mine was in charge of enforcement for all of Canada immigration, and he used to fly people all over the place back home after they were deported. And he was telling me the stories about how hard it was sometimes to get permission. So I was thinking, wow, that's probably true in the US. So what is happening is people are anticipating there may be this problem, and they're going to need housing. So the government is actively pursuing construction of new housing for detention purposes. And in that regard, a Canadian firm that I'm aware of has gotten a contract to build these, what you might call trailer houses for the US to use for purposes of detaining migrants in case they cannot be immediately deported. So that there's an example of an industry that's developing. And I'm aware that in the United States, one of the big industries and one of the things that people are preparing for is for this detention issue. And there are, I think, military bases that may be converted to homes, places for these people who will be in limbo. They can't go back, but they're arrested. They can't work, so they got to live somewhere. So they're going to be placed in these private detention facilities. And I understand there's quite a heavy interest and market for building such homes or preparing such detaining facilities, which will house all these people that are going to be detained.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's an industry that has not been flourishing for quite some time and is likely to come to the forefront in these conversations that we're having with all of these immigration issues specifically. And I'm curious if you've seen issues pop up or if you anticipate issues popping up of technology transition being impacted. We are constantly saying from a government perspective that we need to have the latest, the greatest, the best technologies.
Right.
And oftentimes those aren't necessarily homegrown. There's
Right.
quite a lot of technology that's developed in and around Canada and in other countries that we would like to have access to, that we find that we need to be able to leverage, especially with things like the war in Ukraine going on. There's all sorts of examples of technologies that are more advantageous, that are faster to make, that are cheaper, that the US is just really hounding after and really wanting to get access to. And I'm curious from your perspective, do you think that the trade wars and the tariffs are going to impact the ability of American warfighters to be able to acquire technologies from our neighbors?
You've touched on a real hot button there, Chelsea. In regard to drone technology, Ukraine is
Yes.
now leading the world in drone technology
Yes.
and
Yes,
warfare.
definitely.
Indeed, I happen to be Ukrainian in background, so I follow this from day to day. The war is completely turned upside down technologically, and drone technology seems to be having a tank stuck in a mud field somewhere is not helping people. But
Right.
these drones are really making a difference in the war, and Ukraine is leading the world in that technology. Indeed, some of the brains, and I've come across them, they've come through my office, some of the top guys in the field of cybersecurity, because Ukraine has been targeted with cybersecurity attacks.
Over and over.
Even before the war, entire cities were shut down and they had to learn how to defend themselves. So I met some of the top cybersecurity people in the world just coming through on visits traveling to the U.S. and into Canada to talk about what they know and what they could share with the United States and with Canada. That's a burgeoning field of great need. If you're isolating Canada, the United States, and it's going to be America first, I would imagine cybersecurity would be high up in your priorities, that you need the best of the best. And also, if you're a leader in military defense or even offense, equipment, arms, and so on, I would imagine you'd want to stay close to the people who are most tested now, probably in the world in this area. So those are two
Right.
fields that they would be wise to try and cultivate better relations with the leadership over there and help out and in turn benefit from that area. You've also touched on a really sensitive subject, which is the big universities in the United States, Harvard, Columbia, and several of the others, are very alarmed. And I just went to a University of Toronto lecture last night on this very subject. And one of the speakers, who, as a matter of fact, was from the United States, was talking about how is it that America is a leader in terms of innovation and technology. And the answer, because they have some of the leading universities in the world. And why are they leading? And there were several factors. One was at the end of World War II, they scooped up some of the greatest brains from Germany and brought them over. And that became the nucleus, many of them Jewish, by the way, Jewish professors and nuclear scientists and so on. That became the nucleus of a new university culture and like an intellectual base. And then they started recruiting from all over the world, some of the best minds in technology and physics, the key subjects, STEM areas, science, technology, engineering, and so on. And of course, attracts like, so you could say opposite, but attracts like in the sense that if you got some of the leading minds in the world teaching at Harvard, at Columbia, at Yale, and so on, they're attracting. Just by the fact that they're there, they're attracting people to come in to be with them and to develop new industries and so on. And one of the big downsides of what's going on right now is the attack on the universities and cutback on funding in key areas of like science and medicine has reverberated not only through America, but overseas as well, and Canada, in the way of their participation in leading research in medicine and science technology. The United States, here's the problem. Normally in economics, there's a principle of division of labor and the law of comparative advantage. Two basic key ideas. One is do what you do best.
Right.
And the other is, even if you can't do the best at whatever it is, or even if you do the best at whatever it is, if someone else can do it cheaper than you, let that person do it. The cheaper you go on to do what you're best. If you're a nuclear physicist, but you can also clean your shoes, it's wiser for you to have someone clean your shoes while you do nuclear physics,
right,
making $10,000 an hour rather than $10 an hour cleaning shoes.
Yes.
Even though you can clean your shoes even better than the guy who cleans his shoes. But still, it's better for you to use him, and both of you benefit best. That's comparative advantage.
Yes.
And division of labor naturally do what you do best, and everybody benefits. America is best at entrepreneurship, at funding new ideas, getting them off the ground and into the marketplace. They're spectacular at that. They're not so good at theories, employing guys who are pushing levers to get robots to do things like that. You don't have to be a genius to do that work. But that's where we're headed in this area of technology, unfortunately, is just take the car industry, for example. Right now, why is the car industry split half in the U.S., half in Canada? It's precisely because of this. The United States doesn't need to be in car manufacturing. It's not an area. Okay, yes, it can be in car manufacturing, but that's not where its greatest strength is. If you want to go to car manufacturing, you're abandoning the marketplace, like the area where you have the greatest strength, and someone else is going to say, China will be delighted to step in and take over.
Oh, I'm sure.
And India's training by the thousands, by the tens of thousands, education-wise. Last night, again, there was a guy talking about, geez, education-wise, the United States has slipped down. I think they're 15th or 16th in the world. And it's just a matter of paying attention to these basic economic realities. So this tariff situation, let's put it this way. Guys are trying their best. They're doing their best. They believe what they're doing and so on, okay? You try, like in business, I have been through this, I'm sure you have too. You try something, you try, it's not working, it's not working, it's not working. Finally, you say, this is not meant for me.
Yes.
I'll just show you one example. See that thing up there? Okay, that's a Toastmasters. I'm a distinguished Toastmaster, okay?
Yeah.
For 35 years, I went to Toastmasters meetings once a week, a club meeting where we learned how to make verbal presentations. 35 years. After 35 years, I finally became a distinguished Toastmaster, which is the top of the line.
Sure.
But the world didn't want me to give verbal presentations. No, Andy, that's not where you belong. You belong writing. I ended up being a Forbes contributor. I've been a Forbes contributor for 10 years. And before that, I was a UN correspondent in New York. That was the world telling me, no, not right now. We don't want you there. We want you over here. And that's what the world is telling us. To me, it said, despite 35 years of trying, you got to go over here. There's a moment when you're flogging a dead horse and you realize, oh, son of a gun, it's just not working.
Yeah.
That's when you have to reflect, maybe be humble, withdraw, regroup, and charge again in a different area. I think that's where we're at right now.
Man, I really hope it doesn't take us 35 years to get to that point where we feel like we need to pivot from this.
I hope so. Yeah, you're right.
Man, it is one of those things where there's a lot of perspectives and a lot of views out there on the right way to go about doing things and the right things to do and to bring back into the country. And I think we're seeing it all over the place in terms of the signs pointing to this could probably be done a little bit better and have a little bit more consideration behind it. And I'm seeing a lot of discourse in all sorts of media about where the right things to contribute to, where the wrong things to contribute to are. And I'm curious, do you see the areas in which we are defunding, things that we are putting on the back burner and starting to pay less attention to, becoming more important in areas like Canada and our other allies around the world?
Even just from my conversation, I'm in the university community a bit. So the conversations there have been about cutbacks in funding, like you're doing joint research in medical, for example, cancer research, these super bugs and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
So the Americans are leading a whole worldwide effort to solve medical issues, and there's funding involved. So in the Canadian side, for example, last night people were complaining about grants that were canceled and suddenly projects just finished, dropped.
Yeah.
But not projects that some guy wants to build some kind of a new temple or something. No, these are like life and death, serious medical research. What's the best that we can do cancer-wise and stuff like that. So that's an unhappy development. And the cooperation worldwide, trade and so on. Jeffrey Sachs is a professor at Columbia University. He's running around talking about how much I think he said something like overnight we lost $10 billion in trade through these imposition of these tariffs. And he's right. I know him and I don't agree with everything he says, but in that case, I'm afraid he's right that trade is a good thing. We need more trade. Trade makes us all wealthy if we cooperate and work with each other. But there's two ways of doing trade. One is you go around, slap everybody and say, smarten up. I don't want you to do this. I want you to do that. Or the others, you respect each other. And you say, look, okay, what do you want? Here's what I want. Let's do it together. So more of the second and less of the first, and we'll all be happier.
Sure.
So that's what I'm seeing as the need right now. And today, Canada's in the midst of an election. In fact, we're going to know by, I don't know what it is, 9 or 10 o'clock tonight, who will be the new Prime Minister of Canada, whether it's the guy who's Carney, who is the current Prime Minister, or a new guy named Poilievre, likely the conservative guy. We'll see. We don't know. But Canada is bracing itself and trying to make the best out of a difficult situation. They're expecting a recession and lots of unemployment and stuff like that. But it's not too late. I think you have to be open to reaction from people and respect people. And hopefully not everybody in the administration feels strongly about tariffs and that tariffs are a good idea. I see there's a discussion opening. Like, I don't know how to run the world. I'm not God. I don't know the answer to everything. And I don't know how to run America. I'm not saying I know how to run America. One area of concern for me is the lack of discussion between the United States and China. I would like to see, does it take a big thing to pick up the phone and phone the other guy? Like, even if you're the biggest guy in the world, couldn't you just pick up the phone and whoever it is, Xi or Trump, take a moment and just pick up the phone and phone the other guy and start a conversation. Man and a woman split, there's a divorce, they got kids, they got money trouble, and they're too proud to call each other. Let him call me first, or let her call me first. My wife and I argue sometimes, and we have an argument, and then it's this moment of silence, right? And someone's got to say sorry or whatever. So I do it on my side, my wife does it on her side. And I think people have to, it's just being adults. It's
right.
Just the way life is. You can't always be right. Sometimes you're wrong. Even if you're right, it doesn't mean you have to be, you can admit maybe it's not going so well, whatever.
Yeah. Quite a lot of that around here is a lot of unwillingness to come to the table for discussion. And unwillingness to recognize that others, aside from ourselves, may be impacted by this. And it draws parallels, for me at least, in completely different situation, but there's so many parallels that I can see between what America's kind of positioning itself as right now and the impact that Brexit had on Britain not too long ago. And there was a lot of discourse, especially around academics, academic research, and joint academic activities, just simply because ultimately that it was Britain decided that they wanted to do things independently and cut ties quite significantly between the research communities that had joined them over how many years it was, decades of efforts there to create some collaborative relationships for doing research and development, especially within high-level, high-achieving academic institutions like Oxford and Cambridge. And groups like that ultimately had to figure out how to cut ties with researchers and to cut ties into some of that critically important research. And I don't know if that has yet to recover or bounce back or make that sort of rejuvenation that I think everybody probably would like to see. And I very much hope that's not the case with the U.S. right now. But I'm wondering, do you see Canadian academic institutions becoming more open as a result of this?
I'll just give you one example. 3 new profs just came to Toronto, to the University of Toronto, all from Yale. Top stars. Timothy Snyder is one of them. I don't know if you'll know Timothy Snyder. He's a historian, and he's probably the leading voice on what's going on in Ukraine and Eastern Europe. He and his wife, who's also one of these high flyers, but a big star, and one other professor, all three from York University. That's just one example. There are others. I just curious, something that flashed through my head as we were talking on this subject, talking about being stubborn and trying to reach something. Right now, there's a big discussion going on about peace deal between Russia and Ukraine.
Sure.
Okay. And so they were talking about Trump was trying to arrange a ceasefire. So they, in theory, arranged a ceasefire, but Putin decided to bomb. And he dropped something like 2,000 missiles on Ukraine while the ceasefire is going on. And then recently, Putin said, let's do a ceasefire for May 8th through to, I think, the 13th. And the reason he wants a ceasefire is because he wants to celebrate May 9th is a big day, beating Nazi Germany, and they want the May 9th parade there. So the question was, how's Ukraine going to respond to this new overture? He says, we want a ceasefire, no fire, between May 8th and May 13th, but not earlier. So Ukraine said, okay, you want a ceasefire? We start today. Let's start today. I don't think that's going to go over too good for him.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But that's too stubborn. People bickering over ceasefire negotiations. But we're into that. And whether it's Ukraine and Russia or Brexit in Europe or Canada-U.S., we got to do our best in terms of, look, I'll tell you something. I wrote an article about this on Forbes. It's possible for us to have a common market, European economic style, free market in North America, including Canada and the U.S., along the lines of what Trump is talking about, where goods flow freely and people, services flow freely north and south without tariffs or impediments. That's possible. And you could have a perimeter security around North America. So anybody coming into North America would be vetted, scrutinized for weapons and technology and philosophy or ideology and all that stuff. But once they're in, they can travel anywhere throughout the whole North America. That's possible. From what we have now, which is the USMCA free trade agreement between Canada, US, and Mexico, and something between Canada and the United States along the lines of what I'm talking about. That's possible to achieve, not subsuming Canada in the 51st state idea, but reaching this kind of a free trade agreement. I think that's possible. But to bring it down to an analogy, let's say you have a father who's been beating up everybody in the family and is belligerent and does not respect his wife and so on. He leaves for a while. Now you're talking about getting together again. They say, I'm going to be the father. And not if you're behaving like that.
Yeah.
But if you behave yourself, like I'm talking about America, in terms of how it deals with Canada. And I'm not saying whether it was right or wrong, whether you impose the tariffs or not, that's all done. But it would be possible to move in this direction, provided America moves in the direction of remaining a democracy and not an oligarchy. It can't be run by 3-4 guys. There's a statistic, I think it's the top 3 guys in the United States, wealth-wise, have as much wealth or more wealth than the bottom 50% of the population.
Yeah. Yep. Very much.
How do you work with that?
It's hard to work with, but it's surprisingly easy to achieve, apparently, for some folks. They're definitely up there, and we see a lot of support for them down here.
Yeah. It's not a sin to be wealthy if they will use their wealth to benefit not only themselves, but the people who are not wealthy. But if it's all about their wealth and becoming more wealthy and to heck with everybody else. There's this saying that Zig Ziglar used to say, you can get anything in life you want, so long as you help enough other people get what they want. So that's the philosophy that's more in need today. I'd say North America than the philosophy of let's circle the wagons and keep the foreigners out, and we're going to lead a happy and prosperous life at the hell with everybody else.
Right.
Doesn't work.
Yeah, and I think we see that throughout the world and throughout our country. It tends to be a greater benefit to society when others are using their wealth to benefit groups of people and entities that may not be as fruitful in what they do. And I think a lot of that comes down to grant funding and funding like that. When we see funding stripped away based on personal bias or personal need, it tends to reverberate throughout industries and reverberate throughout the community.
Forgive me, there's an added element here, and it's that there are literally trillions of dollars of stolen money from poor countries that are sloshing around in bank accounts worldwide. Many in the United States, many of the guys who took the money from former Soviet states and then Africa and everywhere. America needs to crack down on these kind of people.
Yeah.
So does Canada. Every country, any democracy needs to this illicit money circulating. Putin is the richest man in the world, not Musk. Putin is the richest man in the world. And his whole thing, his whole way of governing is he's got about 20 oligarchs around him that listen to him and do what he says. And so long as they don't meddle in his political world, they're left alone and they're given great advantages, government contracts, and they benefit. And there's about 1,000, I don't know, maybe 1,000 people who support all this. That's his core constituency. But the rest of the country is a disaster. There's 2-3 cities in the United States that are doing really well. Moscow, St. Petersburg, Vladivostok, maybe. But otherwise, the country's really in bad shape. So I don't know if we want to go in that direction. I hope we don't. We need a strong middle class, I would think. And it's not that we should be enemies of the rich. We shouldn't. We need rich people, good rich people who make money the right way, basically. But we also need to crack down on this illicit trade, the money laundering.
And I would argue that's probably one of the areas in which we could probably do some shaving and cutting of fraud, waste, and abuse, is in ultimately leveraging some of that illicit trade that is happening, rather than cutting out legitimate efforts in reducing legitimately necessary things within the federal government across the board.
Yeah.
It's a very hard conundrum that we find ourselves in right now, I would say. And ultimately, I would like to hope that we're not leaning in the direction of one guy at the top with a bunch of rich people around him, but you've got to look at what we have right now and see if that's the case. So hopefully there's some brighter minds and more invested advisors that are looking to shape the way things are being done and the way that things are being portrayed, at least out there right now. This is a difficult conversation for sure across the board. Yeah. And I don't think we're gonna solve any world problems today in this conversation, but very valuable, and I think that folks will get a lot out of this. We're not a political podcast, so we're not trying to put that slant or sway on anybody here, but I think your input's been very valuable and very respectful. How do folks get a hold of you if they want to learn more about you, reach out and find out more about you? How can they do that?
I work for Pace Law Firm, PACE Law Firm in Toronto. You can reach us at pacelawfirm.com. Ask for Andy.
Perfect. Are you on LinkedIn?
Yes, I'm on all the social media channels. I don't know if I passed those on to you or not, but if I haven't, I could pass them on to you.
Yes, that'd be wonderful. We'll get them in the show notes for everyone who wants to follow and keep track of, and they'll be able to keep an eye out for your next contribution to Forbes as well.
Yeah, I've got one coming out. I hope today I'll have another one coming out. If you type in my name, Andy Semotiuk, Forbes, you'll find all my articles, and then you can just click whatever one you're interested in.
Perfect. We will absolutely include all that info in the show notes. This has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
It was a pleasure. Thanks a lot, Chelsea.
All right. You have a great rest of your week. Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of GovCon Unscripted with your host, Chelsea Roberts. Do you have a GovCon story or need guidance in government contracting? Connect with Chelsea on LinkedIn to be a guest on the show or to enhance your business strategy. Don't forget, your network is your net worth. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with your growing GovCon community.